Okay,
Okay.
go ahead. About the couple.
Yeah, so in the session, I started off with the withdrawal first this time, and I guess they had a bit of a conflict. And it was like how they explained it, it was just over like making a decision about like wanting to go somewhere or not. It was something like very, they didn't think like they didn't go too much in detail with what the situation was, but more so like what came up for them, I guess. And then so how so what I understood was that what the withdrawer or sorry, what the pursuer usually does is the pursuer would be the one that would just like go towards the withdrawer and just keep going close when the pursuer
Like
is looking,
physically, you mean?
yeah, physically going close, like,
Okay.
oh, like what do you think about this? Like she'll ask a question or say something, right? Like, oh, like,
Okay.
okay, what are your thoughts? And then if he doesn't respond right away, like she'll like automatically start moving towards him and saying stuff. And then she did admit, she's like, I want a reaction from him. Like that's why I moved closer to him.
Mhm.
And and then it's like, and then we explored a bit about like how long does that, like how much space or time do you give him to actually process or think about it before you want that decision? And she's like, it's actually like instantly, like I want a decision or something made instantly, like the response. What she did talk later a bit about, like I think she said she's diagnosed with ADHD, which I wasn't aware of before. And then so that, like I feel like the last part of the session when we did turn towards her, first I started off with the withdrawer, and we explored a bit about like what goes on when she comes at you or what happens. And then he explained that I'm just so afraid to say anything wrong because I don't want to make her even more upset. And then I'm just trying to like,
Did you get to enact that at all? That sounds like a good
yeah, just
enactment.
that's
Yeah,
the part that I enacted, or they enacted.
good.
So it's
And how
like,
did
okay,
that go?
I so initially, like I'm just gonna check my notes as well. So yeah, so then the pursuer was like at that moment, it's like, okay, feeling like a bit of like, okay, I don't want you to feel this way, like in a bit of a guilt, like, okay, I don't want you to feel this way, but I feel like you're not being genuine still with your responses. Like you try
Okay.
to say things,
So let's slow down. So he enacted that I get scared of it escalating
mhm,
more, you getting more upset. So
right,
he enacted that this fear, and that's
right.
her response that you're describing.
Yeah, so then she's like, I
Okay.
don't like,
Yeah.
instantly she was like,
And
okay,
what did you do with that? That it's not genuine, right? Like that's what she said. What did you do with that?
I guess like I kind of just like asked her like what that means for her, like what would genuine be for her. And then
So here's what is really important to do here. So and something to really kind of hammer home. So when he's taking a risk to share,
mhm,
it's really important that he ends up getting that processed,
right,
right? So if you then so he's kind of going on a limb here, a leap of faith, so to speak, and it's not easy for him to take this risk.
right,
So what I mean by him processing this, we can't just go and switch over to her experience at that moment before we close up. Think of it as like it's like a surgery. It's like open
mhm,
heart surgery. You opened him up. An
right,
enactment is like opening someone up, like a surgery. And until we do whatever we need to do inside the surgery, the processing part, and close it up, we can't really go to her.
right,
Like in terms of a new experience, we're still supporting him in his surgery.
right.
Okay.
So I
So
did mention to him, like, I mean, like when that he did enact that, and right before we moved on, I was like, oh, like that's so like, that's so difficult for you to like experience that,
it's
or like,
that's you. That's you.
right,
That's good. The validation can't come from you. The
okay,
processing doesn't come from you. The
right,
processing comes from the attachment figure.
okay,
Okay. So as much as we have some power to change the cycle, we need to have her be able to really tap in to what it's like for her when he connects to his fear in this case.
okay,
So there was something blocking her from that, right?
mhm,
She interpreted something, or she was like her head or her attention was somewhere else, right?
right,
Her attention was where? So what did she end up saying? Something about I don't believe you. This isn't genuine, something like that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you ask her. So you weren't able to let what he just said in. Were you able to connect to the fear? Could you hear it at all? Right? Like
Okay.
you need her to hear the
Mm,
actual experience that you heard.
right.
Part of what is their problem, their where they get stuck in their cycle is she can't hear him.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he's
Mm-hmm.
taking a risk in session, she can't hear him. So you have to slow her down and go, look, pursue her. What did you hear from what he just said? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What if you're her, for example, let's do a role play. What would she say there? So what did you hear?
And this is the expectation, or like what, or how like her response was totally different
Think
than
of what
what.
she would say. Yeah, that's okay, but it would be some kind of block, like some kind of coping, some kind of like, what do you think she heard? So like just pretend to be her. Like what would she say? Give me a curveball, basically.
Okay, so it's like maybe like I don't believe him because it's happened in the past as well, where he says he cares or says things, but it
Mhm.
happens again.
Right. So what you heard, let me see if I got you right. So what you heard from what he shared is more about how you don't think he cares about you, but you couldn't really hear his fear right now in this moment. Is that right?
Yes.
Did when you think back to when he was just looking at you and shared this fear that I heard him say around you getting more upset, were you able to hear any of that? Or was any of it like in your sort of experience just now?
I think it, I did hear him, but I just feel like it's just happened way too many times
Yeah.
that for me to be able
So
to
it's a
actually.
mixed experience then.
Right.
Something's getting in the way, right? Some kind of you're remembering the past, you're worried about the future. You're really hearing the past here when he's sharing with you. You're not really hearing what's right here in the room with you, right? What he's sharing. But a part of you did, you just said, right?
Hmm.
So let's break this down into kind of two experiences. So when you did hear the fear, when you hear your partner right here, right now, share that he's afraid of you, he's afraid of getting you more upset. What is that like for you when you just hear that part?
I do think that like I'm happy to hear that he cares about me, or like is worried about me not getting upset, or
Yeah, so that kind of tells you he does care. If he's worried about your reaction, that's a form of him caring. So when you really sit with that, you can connect it to him caring, because that's your concern, is that he doesn't care. But you're saying if he is afraid of my response, that must mean he cares. Right.
mm-hmm.
So you're saying that's a kind of a good experience, yes? To hear
Mm-hmm.
that he's afraid. Yeah. Now, do you want him to be afraid of you getting upset? Is that something that you want?
No, I don't want him to get
Oh,
afraid.
okay,
I just
good.
want him to be
Yeah.
genuine with his react, even if he's
Yeah.
like upset or whatever it is. Like I don't want him to
Yeah.
always try to
Yeah.
like just, yeah, just like fake anything to make sure that
Right.
that I'm okay.
Right. Okay, good. So when you really take that in, when you really take this fear in, it does kind of feel good, like he cares, and you also don't want him to feel afraid to be open with you. Can you share that with him, what you just shared with me? Can you turn to him and say that exact same thing? Now you help him heal by helping her connect to what underneath the block, and then that's what you share back. Have her share back, because that's what's going to be complete the enactment.
Okay, right.
Right? Does that make sense?
It does. I think what I was, again, like where I went, what I ended up doing was that validation piece, like providing the validation from my end to him,
Yeah.
versus like I
Yeah.
understand now the whole
Yeah.
aspect of like making
Yeah.
sure that.
So before you validate anything,
Hmm.
have him do the enactment in this case. You can check in with them. What's that like to share it like that? When you look at her, what's it like? What are you feeling? Because especially if he's honest about that and he's like really on edge, and it's like, oh, I really don't know how she took it in or anything like that, then you really want to slow it down. Then it's even that much more important that you get He's waiting to, it's this leap of faith. It's like the trust exercise, you just kind of fall back. You want the person that's supposed to catch you, not the therapist in this case. So you check in. It's, oh, this is really important for him. It really was a risk because it's still scary for him. You really want to know what it's like for her. You go to her. You don't worry about validating. When you can do the validation is once she's reflected back to him what that's like for her, right? Then you can go, wow, you took an amazing risk, right? In his case, right? Like that was really hard for you, whatever the truth is for him. And then we worked with Pursuer a little bit. It was really hard to let it in at first, but with some work, you were able to, and you were able to give him that thing that he really needs. That, well, first you go back after she enacts, you go back to him and say, what was that like? What was it like to hear that she this shows that you care to her and that she doesn't want you to be afraid, right? What's that like? What does that do to your fear, right? So then after that, you can do the validation. You can like do the psycho ed around what just happened and how you can do that at home and that kind of thing, right? And that's where all the, like, you both did great. Here's what the challenge was. Here's how you were able to overcome it, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And you keep it with them first because they're the most powerful thing in each other's lives, like especially in that moment where they're taking that risk. Right. Yeah, you support him to get to that point where he can take the risk, but once he takes the risk, it's the two of them. Yeah. Now, if it turns out that you're still working with her, she still is not able to let it in, like the worst case scenario, let's say, then you can at least learn about what the block is. So let's say she wasn't as cooperative as you were in this role play. And let's say she goes, you know what? No, this is all bullshit. I don't buy anything he's saying. And then you can go, well, what did you hear? Like if your experience as the therapist is different than hers as the receiver, like you felt it was vulnerable, she still can't get to where you're at. There's obviously something going on for her, right? So what you want to do is bring that out. So let's say it's like, I've heard this all before. He said he's scared, but I don't really think he's scared. Look, he did all the stuff yesterday. There's no way someone that's scared would do that. And then you go, okay, so what's actually happening is you're not hearing what he's sharing right now. Like, you might go, did it seem genuine, his fear? And you go, yeah, maybe it did, but I can't believe it. There's no way he does this, but then, he's not really, he's acting for you or something like that. So then when you go back to him, because she's not going to go back to him, but you go back to him with this kind of information of like, what was the block for her that didn't allow her? So then he learns it's not about how he shared. There was nothing wrong with how he shared. There's nothing wrong with him. Because that's what withdrawers often think. There's something wrong with them. They always fail. They always do it wrong. So it's like you're giving them the feedback. No, you didn't do anything wrong. But can you see how hard it is for her to let this in? Or can you see what comes in her way? Sometimes it is something small in the way that the person said something, like maybe he threw a but in there and this and that, and that's what didn't allow her to hear it. But if he really shared very clear, very vulnerable, there wasn't really anything there as far as a trigger is concerned. It's mostly about her, and it's just her being afraid to let it in. Maybe it's what, like, I run into this with some couples. They've been asking for this for years. They finally get it. They can't let it in. Even though they've been asking for it, because it's a big risk, right? Because you can go, what would it mean for you to let it in? It would mean that I have to trust him again. And then that's a big risk. And if I trusted him and then it did keep happening, then it would be really painful. I need to see it happen more. So you are telling him he's doing the right thing, but it's really just hard for you to let it in today. And that if this was to continue to happen, then it would be easier for you to let it in. And then, so it's all about that. Like when someone goes on this limb of sharing something hard, we really want to reinforce that, to reassure them that that's the right thing to do, that they did really good, right? And yes, ideally it comes from them, the partner, and in a good world, they're able to respond well. But if they're not, you break down the experience and like find out what is it that they actually heard. And if there was something in what they heard that that you also heard, go, okay, that's a mixed experience. This part you could hear, and this is what this part made you feel really good. Like you want to reassure him, you want to tell him, don't be afraid. I won't get mad if you share like this. But then this other part that you heard where it did trigger you, you break that into a separate experience. And then that's what this was like. But first share the good part, then you go, and then you go back. Can you see the difference? Can you see how when you said this is how she felt when you shared this part, this kind of got in the way, and all you heard right away was the reaction, and then I slowed you guys down. That's what catching the bullet means. It's like,
okay.
you don't always catch the bullet right as it's coming out. Sometimes you do, if you can. You go, oh, let me stop you. Let's try that again. You know, but sometimes you let the bullet land, and then you kind of work with the bullet too in a way. But you always recognize it's this like one-way thing, with all this energy, and then you want to slow it down and process it. And you know, it's like, I kind of see an enactment as like, this is always like a risk, but it's if it doesn't come out well, it's still an opportunity to understand what's going on, because it's like real, right? What they're sharing, even though it might come with some coping in there, like some statements that are triggering, it's still more real, more genuine, more vulnerable than what they do at home.
Right.
So it's like an opportunity to move towards that path and to kind of weed out what was helpful, what was not helpful about it.
Yeah, I think like what happened in the session was that afterwards, like it just kind of got lost in a way that when like that enactment happened, and then when their pursuer started speaking about like genuine, being like that it's not genuine enough, and that sort of stuff. But she did share about her ADHD at that point. It's like, okay, like, you know, I feel like it was more of at that time, it's like, okay, my mind is always running, there's always something going on, and you know, it's just like racing, and I just feel like I want responses like immediately, even though I know like this is when she was being vulnerable in a sense, like, oh, I know it's not right, like I shouldn't be like, then it was like more of like, I know I want to be doing this differently, or I shouldn't be doing this. It started going towards that, like he understands that, you know, when I'm in that little phase where I'm just like, I get like, I feel like it just shifted towards her then at that point, and more about like how things are with her ADHD, and how that shows
Yeah,
up.
and that's typical for pursuers to kind of demand the attention. It's a double-edged sword, because I run into this with students even earlier in this week, is that we follow what's the loudest, right? Sometimes as therapists, like this is the person, the pursuer is the educated one. They seem to know what they want. They seem to, you know, be
Right.
clear and all this kind of stuff. It's a slippery slope, because if you give them what they, not what they need, but if you give them what they want and what they ask for, what tends to happen is it throws off the balance of EFT, and ultimately they don't know their own blind spots, as you know, no one does, but like they're very assertive in like, this is the way it is, and by listening to them, we're actually doing a disservice to them. Like, for example, sometimes pursuers will say, my partner is the problem, they have these issues, and then if you listen and you actually try to work with a partner, what's going to often end up happening is that's going to be, the pursuer is going to be the one that complained that you spent all the time on the partner, but you did what they said, what they wanted. But the problem is EFT has to be about equal risking.
Right.
So risking doesn't mean like it to the same depth, but it means equal risk taking. So one moment we're risking with this person, one with this person. We're meeting them where they're at, and different things are different risks for each of them. But the consistent thing is, wherever they're at, we have equal sort of turns. Not that you have to measure it or anything like that, but you do have to have a kind of, develop a sense of like time, and are we spending equal amount of time? Are we spending an equal amount of like experiential time, where we're, you know, it's not just general time, but experiential time with each person? Because if only one side is taking a risk, both sides lose. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and in this sense, like in this case, she just kind of started talking about like how he's actually supportive and caring in that way, like, oh, like he understands this part of me, and he tries his best to do whatever he can to be there. Just kind of like, yeah, it was not more of like that, like blame, but it was like she started like shifting that blame onto herself. So I guess it was like, okay,
Yeah.
there was like,
So pursuers have this, their insecurity is that they're not lovable.
right.
And so often a way to cope with that is to do more things. So then they end up being loved for what they do, not for who they are, because growing up, they didn't get that unconditional sort of attention, love,
Mm-hmm.
responsiveness. And so with that comes a lot of like self-blame. Either they're blaming the other part, their partner or their world, or they're blaming themselves. So it can, the attention can switch very quickly back and forth, right?
Right.
So ultimately, that's also coping. To blame someone else and to get responsiveness from them because they're being
Mm-hmm.
aggressive is a coping, because it's a substitute of getting their needs met. To blame themselves is also coping, right?
Right.
It's the coping of like, hey, if everyone around me growing up blamed me, if I pre-blame myself, then I'm already
Mm-hmm.
bracing and ready for the world to blame me.
Right.
But what you want to do is get underneath that experience, right?
Mm.
There's always a trigger, right? There's always a trigger, which is something to do with their early environment. That's like an associative sort of trigger, right? That,
Mm-hmm.
today something in the environment, and you're doing couples counseling, so something that their partner is doing or not doing becomes a trigger, whether it's like something really that they're doing or the perception from the pursuer that they're not doing enough or not doing the right thing, not doing it the right way, not seeing me, not hearing me, this kind of thing. This is not an objective thing. It's just a subjective experience that they're having. So you want to get underneath that, right? Like, what is the thing that he's doing or not doing, like that triggers you, right? So you mentioned like he's not responding quick enough, right? I need a
Mm-hmm.
response right now. That's probably not always the case. It's just in these moments when she's triggered. That's your
Right.
entry point. So walk me through what happened. You're on the couch and like like
Mm-hmm.
like you we can role play this as well. So you're her. So give me more context a little bit, and then I'll kind of be therapist here.
Yeah. So I usually, like, if there's anytime there's something happening, like for example, there was this event, and then um my yeah, just coworkers asked me if I'm going to this event. So I asked my partner if like we should go, and then he just looked at me and he didn't give me a response. So I knew that he didn't want to go. So I declined the offer.
Great. So let's slow that down here. So there's something about his look that was a trigger. Is that correct?
Yes.
You really maybe wanted to go to this thing. You wanted to go together. And you asked him, you took a risk to ask him, so you really wanted to go, and then by him not responding, it sent you some kind of message. What message did you get in that moment, you think? Not what you, and I would look at him, maybe I'd say not what you actually sent, but what is it that you perceived? What is it that you took what did you take that to mean, that
That
absence of a response?
that he doesn't want to go, because if he wanted to go, he would have said
Yeah,
yes right away. He wouldn't have to
right,
think about it.
that he doesn't want to go with you.
Hmm.
Yeah. And what do you think to yourself when your partner of X years that you live with, add the kind of flavor that you really love, that's so important to you, that you took this big risk, that he doesn't want to go with you? What do you tell yourself right now? What would you tell yourself in this moment?
Um, I think I would just question myself, or like start questioning like whether if he like, is there something wrong? Like, why does he always refuse to go out with me?
Yeah,
Does he not like being
he
in public
doesn't,
with me?
yeah. So something about me, right? In all these
Hmm.
cases, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. What's it like to think that there's something wrong with me? To have that thought, there's something wrong with me.
It's it's sad.
Yeah, you get sad. So you
Hmm.
kind of bring it back to them. So it brings up sadness for you, is that right?
It
Yeah.
does.
Now, and then so there I would probably just try to distill it, like have her sit in it, maybe say, can you feel that sadness right now? For example, that's me having her attend to the sadness. So you'd say,
Right.
yeah, where do you feel that right now? I can feel that you feel it right now. I can sense it. Where in your body do you feel your sadness right now?
Oh, you're asking me as a client?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you're the client.
Um,
Yeah.
mm, I think I feel it in my chest.
Yeah. Can you describe it for me? Like, what's the sensory, like, what's the sensation in your chest? Is it like a stabbing, a hollowness, a pressure? Like, how do you just define it?
Yeah, it just feels like really heavy, like there's something
Heavy.
there.
Okay. Yeah. And it's pretty intense, or how strong is it?
Um, it is intense, but I wouldn't say it's like really, really intense. Like it's there. It makes it
Yeah.
difficult to, I feel like I can't say certain things at times. Like it's difficult to speak.
Yeah. So like a 5 out of 10 or something like that. It's pretty significant, something like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you can feel it right now in this room.
I can.
Yeah. Good. Now, what would that be like to turn to him and to share that with him right now? Right. That's basically it. And then you might say, yeah, no problem, or yeah, it wouldn't be that easy. If she says
Hmm.
no problem, I'd go, can you look at him right now? And then have her look. And then once she's looking, can you still feel that sadness? Or is it like, has it changed to something else now that you're looking at him, right? Like, what happens to
Hmm.
that sadness? Oh yeah, now it's scary, Like, what would that be? What are you scared of? What do you think he would say if you actually let him see this part of you? And then
Hmm.
you can work on sharing the fear instead of the sadness, and just making it about the fear of sharing. Like, what are you afraid that he would do or say? So you
Right.
always kind of want to start there, start with the fear, because then it's going to be shared more vulnerably
Right.
than if the sadness then can turn to something else, into anger or something like that, because it's too
Hmm.
overwhelming or too exposing.
Right.
And but once you share the fear and you get a good response, and you have time still left in the session, and then you can go, what's the fear like right now, after he reassured you and said, no, please, I'd love for you to share this part of you. Because you might end up enacting, I really want to share this with you, and I have these experiences often, but I'm really scared because I'm worried again that you'll just go blank, you won't
Hmm.
respond, that you'll laugh at me, whatever the thing is. And then he'd go, no, of course I wouldn't laugh at you. I would love to hear this part. And then you ask her, what's the fear like right now? It's down to like a 1 or 2 or something like that. Okay, now what would it be like? Let's bring the sadness back up that you were talking about. Again, I wrote down, the thought is, he thinks I think there's something wrong with me, right? When he says no to me, right? Or whatever the thought is. Can you feel that sadness again? So the anchor is like that sort of self-belief, the perception, the thing you tell yourself in reaction to your partner saying
Hmm.
something which you perceive as he doesn't care or something like that, right? So
Hmm.
then you bring the sadness, and then now you say, hey, can you share the sadness now that, again, you can bring it up to that feeling of like 5 or so out of 10.
Hmm.
And then you have her share, you have him share what it's like for him to hear his partner share her sadness. And ideally, withdrawers are pretty good, as it sounds like in
Hmm.
this case, he's very supportive, but
Right.
she is giving him the opportunity to be supportive, because she's exposing that part of herself that she is not usually comfortable to show.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think like what I probably need to do a bit more. It was fine like the first session, but like last session I noticed like when the pursuer did end up start speaking, um, then it was kind of like it just shifted, I guess, like the whole session to on towards her. But like maybe just like being more cautious about that, more aware, and just like interjecting and just like bringing it back to the
Yeah,
enactment or whatever is like happening at
yeah,
that time, right?
yeah. It'll come with time. It's this whole catching the bullet is it's not like a natural thing that counselors do, right? It
Mm-hmm.
because you're working now from a model, it's very different than just kind of following. But
Right.
the reason you do this is because you take into consideration, like, he's taking a big, whoever the enactor is taking a big risk, especially the withdrawer. So
Mm-hmm.
withdrawers, their experience is always about not being safe, right? Every time they
Mm-hmm.
try to take a risk, they're shut down.
Right.
And and maybe they aren't as fast as the pursuer is at sharing their experience, and they see the pursuer as like they're always fast, they're always quick, and I can't give them what they want. I'm not fast enough. I'm a failure. I'm failing them. My only goal is to make them happy, and I keep hearing how they're unhappy, and they're unhappy with me, and so I'm failing them, right? So it's like it feeds into this thing. But
Right.
there's also resentment that can be built, like when I do try to share, you get mad at me, but I do what you ask me to do, and I never get it right because here you tell me to do this, I do what I think I'm hearing, and it's not enough. I do all these things,
Yeah.
I'm answering on the surface, or you tell me you want this, and I try to read this book and I still can't get it right, this kind of thing. So it's and they're very sensitive to their partner's anger
Right.
because they get good at it over time. And the pursuer is more sensitive to like the withdrawing. So it's like it's a cycle that gets bigger because it's growing together, right? Pursuers will pursue more over time, withdrawers will withdraw, and they both get more and more sensitive to that, to the
Right.
opposite side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we want them to get sensitive to, or to attend more to, is to themselves and not the outside. Right? And that's the one of the main shifts that happens in the first stage, is that instead of like the outside is the enemy and the outside is the thing I'm trying to always try to avoid and cater to, it's like what's happening to me, and that's different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think like even like the role play, like I feel like I got a few pointers as to how things I could have shifted or brought them back. Just like something to basically learn from. So I think that was like really helpful. And I think I'm just gonna like try being more cautious and aware of that, and just try practicing that more in session with the client as well for now.
Good. So you got some tools there. So I'll stop the recording here.
Yeah.